thank you all so much for being here. I've been looking forward to this since Beili and Annette agreed. It's an honor to have Beili's work here, and it's an honor to have you both speaking, so thank you so much. I'm just going to start by reading Beili and Annette's introductions, so you all know who they are if you don't already. I'll start with Beili. Beili Liu is a visual artist who creates material and process-driven, site-responsive installations and performances. Liu's current research focuses on the complex ecological, political, and environmental concerns facing the circumpolar north and the urgency of the climate crisis on a planetary scale. Born in Jilin, China, Beili now lives and works in Austin, Texas. Liu received her MFA degree from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, and she is now the Leslie Wagner Endowed Professor in the College of Fine Arts at the University of Texas at Austin. Annette Carlozzi is a champion of local artist communities who stays abreast of international developments. Annette has built an expansive practice as curator of modern contemporary art, with a keen eye for emerging talent and steadfast commitment to looking beyond labels. Raised in Boston and trained at Walker Art Center, she has curatorial leadership positions at Laguna Gloria Art Museum and UT's Blanton Museum of Art, and has served as executive director of the Aspen Art Museum and the Contemporary Art Center New Orleans, as well as visual arts producer for the 1996 Olympic Games in Atlanta. Named to the Austin Arts Hall of Fame in 2013, Carlozzi now creates the occasional special project and offers support to artists and creative enterprises throughout our region. So thank you both, and I'll let you get started.
Great. Thank you all. Thank you and welcome. It's so nice to see a full room of faces, most of them friends. We're delighted that you're here. The rest of you soon to be friends, I hope. We're delighted that you're here, and I'm honored to be in conversation with this formidable maker and thinker, Beili Liu. We've done conversations before in private, talking about Beili's work, talking about the way something she might do could fit into an exhibition that I organized a few years ago during the pandemic at Art Pace in San Antonio. And then I feel like we've had several conversations that root themselves right here in Canopy. We did a coffee chat for Big Medium during the pandemic, so we were all want to be here, but sitting in our respective safe home spaces. I felt like I was in conversation with her and her work when I saw it just a month or two ago, December, January, with that beautiful show at ICOSA that Madeline Irvin organized, artists responding to climate change, probably other people in this room in that exhibition as well. Where else have we talked? Feels like, well, I saw you present just recently, you're everywhere lately. I saw you present just recently at Women in Their Work in a kind of recap and reassessment of the incredible Thirst project that Beili worked on for Women in Their Work back in 2013, and I hope many of you have been here long enough to have memories of that because it was extraordinary. Today, we're here to look at, first of all, and if you didn't get a chance to really go in and stand with it, I hope you will after a talk, to look at this work from 5 years ago, Inheritance from 2019. The materials are pearl cotton crochet, pine tar, thread, needles, and hardware. And as you remember having just looked at it, can you remember having seen or sensed each of those elements? I want to ask Beili first kind of how it came to be, how the materials and their stories inspired you, how it was situated in the place where it was made.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you, everyone, for being here on this beautiful evening. You chose to be with us, and I hope we'll share with you something that's interesting and that's close to our hearts. So the piece started from the material. this beautiful gift of handmade crocheted artworks that was gifted to me by a wonderful local artist, Diane Sandlin. In 2018, she sent me an email and said, I have a large collection of my grandmother's crochet. Would you like to take them? And I was blown away. I said, yes, I would be honored. Women's work is such an important part of my practice. I make use of it in many of my installations and performances. To receive a gift of someone else's work, there's both an honor and also a responsibility. So I went back all our emails today and I said to Diane, I said, I'm not sure what I might be able to do. I'll live with it for a while. I'll update you, anything I do. So that was 2018. In 2019, I realized the first pieces of crochet I used was a pair of little infant's booties. That was for a piece I made for the migrant children crisis when kids were yanked away from their parents' arms. I was using my daughter's clothes to make this large installation, and I was able to take a pair of little crocheted booties and soaked it in cement. It's hardened, it's referring to the loss that cannot be spoken. And then a year later, I went to the Joan Mitchell Center. Before I went, I wrote to Diane, I said, could I have your permission? I have this crazy idea. It's intense. I want to dip the largest bed sheet in pine tar black. Are you okay with that? She said, I trust you. Go for it. And that's how the piece was born. So we actually dipped it in pine tar. Then I folded it and drove it to Joan Mitchell Center. I knew I wanted to make it with that time and space. So I had the soaked and wet and heavy pine tar crocheted with me. And it is to talk about women's work and this collective experience as women, the generations and generations of giving and providing the silent weight that's concealed many times under something so beautiful and soft.
I love hearing as you talk about your story of beginning to approach, sort of like when you see an animal that you want to approach. You wait, you get a sense of it first. You're beginning to approach these materials and what would be appropriate to do with them, in collaboration with them. I know those are words that you like. I love that there's this extraordinary, palpable sense of time that's baked into your process and can still be sensed in the short, medium, long viewing of any of the works. We don't know your story. We didn't watch the process. We haven't seen a film. We haven't heard you talk about it. But I feel like you can really intuit the artist's investigation, questioning of those materials, and the fact that it's not just the material and what the material yields, but truly, in the most humble way, how you pull it back into your own story, because your own story is your understanding of the world. It's a very beautiful looping process, I find, in my own experience of your work. Yeah. When I came to see the piece, I'd only seen photographs that Kevin sent me as we talked about doing this. I did what I've done for 1,000 years as a curator, which is when I look at something, I just start jotting down words, knowing that the words are not one-to-one with the work. They're not one-to-one with my own experience, but they're a reference point. It's like a snapshot for me. I actually don't want to look at an image. I want to, for me, enter a work through the words of association. And for me, I just call it riffing in the same way that a musician would. And so with your permission, I thought I'd just read a couple of the things that I wrote down in my first encounter with the work. There's nothing profound about it. I sometimes turn this into poetry. I have not done that here. It's just to offer, in my own way, a nudge to your own sense memory and brain memory of what your encounter with that work was. because your words, your phrases would be just as relevant as mine. But I looked them back over again, and what I saw was a process of coming to recognize. And I think that's what we do with works of art. So I walked in and I thought, again, I don't know if this is worth doing, but we're going to try it, please. Shawl, blanket, canopy, because we're here, really hard not to. Shelter, like a bedspread, maybe a canopy, but not shelter. Brownish, grayish tar. Again, it's not a poem, it's just words. Indeterminate organic color with a very particular scent. It floats in tension and contraction, shows me gravity's pull. The repetitive this is why this is hard to do. The repetitive crochet pattern is destabilized. The order to it is no longer comfortable. Those hanging threads, the sharp needles, and I needed Savannah's help on that, I must confess. I went around the corner and I said, "Where are the needles? I see needles." And she said, "Well, just go back, look again, but look low." The needles that implied fingers on tools, laboring, looking at them, getting a sense of tears, tracing the drip of tears. Beili later talked about a sense of ache, of hurt concealed underneath. Those were better words for what I'd seen. And finally, fragility frozen like a gesture. And you go home and you think about that, and does it pull back? Or you stand in front of it, if you come back a second time, does it pull back a full sensory understanding of what you have done? How do words play into your process? Yeah.
Thank you for that. That was beautiful. But I'm thinking I need to maybe try that next time I see a work. What a amazing idea. I have an interesting relationship with words. I grew up in China. I used to love to write. I used to write poems when I was in undergraduate. And then I came to America, and all of a sudden I was lost. I don't know what to say or write, who would read it. So I stopped writing in Chinese. And my English, I just didn't think it was good enough. So my relationship with words, there's that attraction and fear. I think we talked about this when we were working on our breath. I said, "You write." And then I have some words that I want to say, and they're very specific how I feel. And over time, now I realize I need to learn to trust my words, like inheritance. That just came, and that is what it is. It's 100%, there's no doubt. Some works are really hard to title, but that's real and true. The intimacy, the fragility, all these terms are so helpful to articulate. But I would say words for me, they're secondary. Today I was chatting with Fritz earlier. We had a tea, and they said, much rather my material speak for me. If I have to, I will use my words, and hopefully they're useful to a certain degree.
Well, you're a sculptor after all. Yeah. I want to segue for a minute. I know we're not going to talk about these a lot, but thinking of you as a sculptor and thinking of sculptors' drawings in particular being so important to a formation process, could you tell us just a little bit about the two works that are hanging behind us? Because these are works of Beili's. They're not in the exhibition. They're hung specially for tonight. So you get a chance to see them, which is very cool. Me too.
Thank you, C, for letting me borrow the wall. This was her work here, so thanks for this space. I see three-dimensional work as drawings in space, and I would say about half the time I sketch, the other half I don't at all. Like this piece was not sketched. It was in my mind. I know what I wanted to do. I arrived at the residency. I have this big open studio. It was a wonderful space. I knew I needed to lift it, you read the form of the bedspread, so you don't actually tie from the very end. You tie just a foot in, so that form, that memory of the bed is retained. And the push and pull, the tension of it, there's a struggle that's frozen in place. I'm going to borrow Annette's word. That's what I can do, borrow your wonderful words. So drawing, to me, these are what I call my drawings. They are, they're very private and they're very light. They are almost like stitching, where I'm not too concerned about what the final image will look like. I'm interested in one stitch at a time. I know as it accumulates, there is a sense of power. There's a sense of transformation that will happen. And in my drawings, I believe the same. So I use a lot of repetitive mark making. And just to talk a little bit about this, the title of the two panels are called Borrowed Ink. They're transferred from magazines. So I'm using this color that's not mine, that's meant to be discarded. They're so beautiful, right? Like, I couldn't mix these colors. And that sense of like communicating with these cheapest printed commercial pages, and to see the beauty in that, maybe that's also what I want to see in my installation work. How do you transform the material? How do you see the impossible come through? I also like to combine things that's completely contradictory. Children's clothes with cement, beautiful pearl cotton crochet with black pine tar. How do you talk about the burden and pain? That's how I talk about it. So I'm going from drawing to the drawing in space and material a little bit too.
I love the opportunity we have to juxtapose these two bodies of work. They're so very different, and yet the way you describe them makes us understand that it's all of a piece, so to speak. Could I tell my story about that piece? Trying to create a rhythm that allows us to talk back and forth and nobody has to talk for too long. It's hard to hold your attention. So as Beili and I were talking earlier in the week about our conversation, just kind of warming up, we didn't get to this at all. It was just, let's talk a little bit about the piece. I began to understand more about the work than I had when I was writing down those phrases. It was percolating in me as we were talking. And I'm a really strong believer in sort of living in art. I don't know how else to describe it. I live in art. I know John lives in art. Many of us do. Certainly makers do. But those of us that are appreciators or writers do as well. We just live in art, and I don't have to define that. You know what I mean. Living in art, I think it's really important to acknowledge the power of the relationship we feel to things. It's a conversation. It's a connection. And as I understood that work, I thought, oh, there are so many levels I can relate to this. And I started out on a fairly superficial one, thinking about the smell of the piece, pine tar. I lived in Louisiana for about 5 years. I worked in a building whose structure was Louisiana pine. The scent was familiar to me. It was just familiar, you know, it was just that edge of familiar to me. So that's simple and that's kind of lovely. But as we spoke, oh my God, it went to really one of the, I don't know what to call it, the most important moments in my life. And I'll share that with you here because I think this is what art does for us. Okay, make it quick. When I was growing up, I was really close to my mother. Youngest child, only daughter, you know, that's familiar, until I was 16. And from that point, for about 5 years, into high school, all the way through college, it was nothing but disagreements. It was estrangement most of the time. And I didn't see much of her. And by the end of that 5-year period, I was across the country in graduate school. And I decided to go home for Christmas, which I didn't usually do, to just, you know, do the thing you're supposed to do and give it a try. And I'm grown up now, I thought. I'll go have this conversation with my family. It was horrible. It was just horrible. We fought the whole time. And on the last day of my stay, I had taken the sheets off the little day bed where I was staying in my parents' home, small home. They'd downsized. And I was getting ready to put the clean sheets on the bed, and my mother came in, and I could sense from her presence that we were going to do this together, two women making the bed together. It's primal, right? So I don't even have to describe that, right? You throw out the sheet. My mother grabs the end. She pulls it towards her. That says, I'm going to make this the way I make this. What do? I pull it back. She pulls it back again. We're in this tussle over the sheet on the bed. And I looked at her and I just cracked up in laughter. And she cracked up. We embraced. We apologized. 5 years melts away over the gesture of the sheet pulled in opposite directions, conflicted, tense. And 2 months later, I got the phone call that she died of a heart attack. So, had I not had that moment, I would have spent the rest of my life regretting and carrying the burden of all that. But because I had that moment right there, as I came to understand this piece and what it could open up in my life, I've lived in freedom, personal freedom, because that was just a moment of love that healed everything. So I mention that without denying that, wow, that's a dramatic story, and oh gosh, yeah, it sounds like that was a really important moment. But I do think art opens up for us the accumulation of all these kinds of moments and connections and stories. And Beili, I feel like in your work, you do this kind of extraordinary thing of taking us from the piercing end of a needle point to narratives of the world all at once, and you're the vessel for that. How do you come to do that?
I think the work is the vessel of that. I'm here to assist. Yeah. And I want to say, I am so grateful for that story. So we were on Zoom. This is just a few days ago. And that was just openly sharing this beautiful but heartbreaking story. And then just the flood of emotion came to me. And, my mind is like, how many times did my mother make the bed for me? I don't even look at it. I don't even remember. She's far away. I haven't seen her for 6 years now because of the pandemic. And then I lost control. Yeah. So the work that moved a dear friend, a wonderful curator, it comes back to move me. But maybe that's what life is about. Like, this art is just this bridge that allows us to travel over and then come back again. And I'm thinking about the minute and the universal. We're all in this. We're all together. We're humanity, but we're also a person. We have our individual pains. We have our collective burdens and concerns. I was reading about Rosa. That's her name, the woman who crocheted these beautiful pieces. Rosa Elliott Freeman. Now I know her name very well. She had 8 children. And I was sitting home thinking my paternal grandmother had 7. My maternal grandmother had 6. Think about that life as a woman. How do you imagine that? How do you balance everything, find joy, and then find time to do this beautiful thing that makes the home wonderful and welcoming? So reading that, this is Diane's newest newsletter, I was like, this is sanctuary, this is refuge for that woman, my grandmother, your grandmother, the grandmothers, women, and us all connected. And what I love is that it's not about, I was born in China, she was born in Texas, I speak this language, you have this hair color. At some level, we go beyond that. Think about the power of that. And that's why when I think about my current interest to go to the north, I'm not going there as a particular someone. I'm going there because we all need to know this. So, sidetrack bit.
Thank you. When we were talking, I also asked Beili, I was playing little word games in my mind and commenting that the names of Beili, her partner, and her child all bring me to the idea of blue. Beili Liu said very quickly, sounds like blue. And so I asked her, and I would ask you now, what does your name mean? And tell the story, if you would, of its relationship to what you're doing now.
Sure. It's a really fun question, and I was amazed that you asked that. It's not very often I get to tell people the meaning of my Chinese name. So Bei means north, like Beijing means the northern capital. Li means standing or establishing. So the part being born a girl in China is kind of a disappointing event for the parents. So my dad, I think in recent years, I went back and said, why did you name me this? He said, oh, you came out, I was disappointed. I'll just call you Beili. Just be in the north, you're fine. I was born in the north. It was matter of fact, there was no guilt, it's not wrong because that was the fact, right? And I think that's the beginning of what I understand of resilience, in the sense, I'm going to do what I need to do, and it's not because what I'm defined as. However, over the years, I started to really love the name. Standing in the north. What a wonderful, simple, powerful name. That's Beili. So when I started dreaming about going to the Arctic, it just seems this crazily powerful, pristine, wild place that we don't know anything about. But once you go there, you see so much fragility. Things are just falling apart in front of your eyes. It's the most beautiful, it's the most devastating. But I'm also living my namesake. And I think I'm going to go back again and again. It will forever influence everything I do from now on.
That was just extraordinary to see, just to see the connections. We all have a sort of mystical side or fascination, and sometimes it's fun and sometimes it's serious, but that was just so beautiful to think about. As you look at inheritance now, it's 5 years later. I don't know if I know it hasn't been shown in Austin before. Has it been shown anywhere else besides New Orleans? Yeah.
So sometimes work happen and then they're stored away. And I'm so grateful when Kevin came to talk to me about a possible collaboration. And I said, I love your project space. I have this work that's been stored away. I would love to bring it back out, to share it with people. And in all these conversations, I think about this crochet that was created and born here in Texas, made by a Texas woman. And this is being shown here, it's coming home. And speaking of that, I've lived here for 16 years now. I love bringing my work back, and I share with Annette. It's not very often I have an opportunity to do that. So whenever I can, I'm so grateful. As artists, we make work to share. And every time we get to share, it's a gift. This conversation is a gift. And the sweetest gift is to share here at home with friends and family. My kid was here. My husband helped me. Kevin helped. New friends, old friends.
Thinking for a second. One of the things that you talked about, and I hear it in much of your description, is that your work questions the boundaries between vulnerability and power. And again, you're doing that both on a personal level and a kind of institutional or systemic level as well. Do you feel in moments like our current era that are so deeply charged with that distance, that your work can take on additional meanings, or that it can be a clear line to hold on to? Or how do you feel making the work that you make at this moment in time? Is it different for you?
That's a really good question. I think a lot of times as artists, we make work because we have to make it. Like I had to go to the Arctic. I don't know how I made it. But there's this desire to make this work. And then once the work is out, I then think about where we are we, what time, what condition the society has. For the first time in the last few weeks, I'm working on another exhibition. I felt resistance because of climate change. I was a little bit shocked, but also realized that's the reality. You know, I've done migrant children work, I've done some very political work, but so far I haven't experienced that. But now it's even, we can't use climate change in the statement. And then I'm wondering, how do I frame that? So that's a new struggle, and that's kind of relating to your question. But that's even more the reason that I need to continue to make what I have to make. As a person, we need to be true to what we do. Kevin was saying that earlier. That's the best we can do. You know, if I can spend the rest of my time to do something I know it's honest and it's something I have a voice I want to use, then that's all what I can do. I read it somewhere recently, 'cause I'm reading a lot about climate change. It was saying our political struggles, it's like a couple fighting in a burning house, and they're fighting, and the house is burning. And we're continuing our fight, and the house is burning. And it's sad and it's devastating. Yeah. What can we do?
Do you see teaching as a political act as well as a creative act? Is it an outlet that gives you another direction to express your concerns as an artist?
That's a really, it's a very timely question. I think I've always seen teaching as a creative act. I've always taught students how to make and how to create. But I think when I return to teaching, everything I learned, I'm going to have to bring it back into my teaching. And it could be complicated, it could be different. I think it might change. I'm in this place both in terms of my career and my teaching. What I want to teach is very different than what our curriculum is offering. And today, I think I'm going to refer to Fritz again. We were talking about, I'm like, I have these classes I want to design in addition to or besides whatever art I'm making. I want to change these things. Do I have that time, energy? Would my institution welcome this? But I think we desperately need these topics to be talked about. And in teaching, it would be the best place to start.
Thank you for your consideration of my questions. I wonder if folks in the audience have questions as well. Laura, your hand went up.
About changing your coursework?
Oh, the first class I really want to make is art and the environment. And we should have it. We don't. I know many schools, they do offer it. I think they're ahead of us. Where I teach UT Austin, I think we are the leader in so many different research topics and conversations.
But there's some. I actually gave a talk at UT, and there was a class about using data and the environment. So it was about data art related to the environment.
Yeah. Is it the studio program?
Might not be.
I'm talking about within my department. I'm wondering if we could make change happen.
Okay. But you just did it.
It has to be voted on and approved and get on the books. You know, like paperwork.
Like bureaucracy.
But what if there's something on the book and then you still just did it?
I think I might actually, that's a great question. So
It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Right. I think I'm definitely changing some of my projects.
Just,
Yeah.
who's gonna know?
Well, we are taping this, but, you know.
But even when we give a lecture, when we go visit a different place, I mean, in addition to the classroom in the defined structure of an institution, I think there's so many opportunities to teach.
This sounds really good. How else are you thinking about changing the coursework?
I mean, the other class we talked about today, it's called Fiber Art and Craft Activism. Don't you think that'd be a great class? So I proposed that already, so we'll see.
We should put in a plug for the Annie Albers class that's going to be opening exhibition. It's going to be opening at the Blanton next week, because that's where that conversation was coming from and could go to. Yes, you had a question.
I love the title when you talked about it a bit, but I also feel in the context of climate conscious art that it's speaking to having inherited the bad decisions of an entire population.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's some grace in that. And I'm just curious, from using your voice for climate awareness, is it hard to kind of navigate a tone that you take?
Could you say a little bit more about a tone? Do you mean what I say, or do you mean the work?
I think it's a gracious approach, and it's not an angry. And so, I'm thinking that's fixed in with being a female artist.
Yes. Coming back to the women's work, that quiet, ongoing laboring and giving away. So that comes back to the question of fragility and power. At the very beginning, when I started using sewing, I think the first piece I did for real was the Mending Project in 2011. It was at What Women Their Work. And that's the moment I said, this is powerful. I didn't think I was powerful at all. At that time, a younger person, artist, faculty member, all that. But when I was sitting under there and sew, the whole sense is the 1,500 pair of scissors are coming down. I can just be here on my calmness, my peaceful sewing away. That is the power. And that is power I believe in. When I went to the Arctic, when I performed, I brought my sewing into the frozen landscape. It is cold, right? Your fingers like falling off of your wrist. But that quiet calmness is power. And that desire, I'm just openly saying that's a prayer. I'm hoping the landscape is listening. This landscape is being destroyed. It's still beautiful, but I'm sitting there quietly. Oh, this is within me, but it's this image. It's a symbol of like, we have this desire to want to have better, to heal. For me, sewing is a gesture of healing. And I talk about that a lot in my work. I think over the years, I've had several threads of interest. They overlap, sometimes they come and go, and they intertwine. There's the cultural memory coming from the East to the West, navigating all that change. The migration experience, the otherness, the fitting in, the surviving, the coping, the quiet. You find ways to survive, and you thrive even. And social concerns. I've done work in recent years, again, that become more political, talking about current issues, and now it's shifting to environmental concerns. All of these different themes are tied with this thread of women's work, this quiet sewing. Our entire society is enabled by every mother. You birth, then you feed them, and then you clothe them, then you do all this stuff. It's all quiet, it's all unseen. So I see women's work as fundamental and powerful. And in my statement, I said I want to make women's work visible, starting from the Mending Project to the Arctic performance to Inheritance, this quiet accumulated power and that beauty that continues. Can we try to heal, but also embrace beauty as well?
No words. Thank you. Other questions? Comments? Sounds like we're full. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so
Beili, thank you so much for opening up and being in conversation here about important things, personal things and important things, and for sharing your work with us always.
And thank you. I always learn so much when we have a chance to talk. It's such a pleasure.
Likewise.
And thank you, Kevin, for letting us